Sinusoids can be manipulated vertically and horizontally. We talked about vertical manipulations, that changes the amplitude and the axis of the wave. The horizontal manipulation would be either a shift, which we'll talk about later, or a stretch or shrink. The stretch or shrink, it changes how often the function repeats itself, how often the interval repeats itself. So that's just 2 cycles of a sinusoid. And if you take from here to here, that's 1 repetition. A repetition is called a period. But it doesn't have to be from maximum to maximum. It could be from minimum to minimum. Or it could be from a completely arbitrary point to where it's at the same height after a full cycle through again. These are all periods of that function. A period is 1 full cycle through the sinusoid. And they're all going to be the same distance. For any sinusoid, that period is going to be the same length every time. Now, for a standard sine or cosine function with no manipulations, the period refers to how long it takes to complete 1 full revolution along a circle. So our standard period is 2 pi. Our standard period is 2 pi. So it would take 2 pi to go from here to there if this were a standard sine. It would take 2 pi to go from here to here if this were a standard sine or cosine, and 2 pi to go from here to here if it were a standard sine or cosine. But it's not always going to be a standard sine or cosine. So our standard period is 2 pi. Forgot my word, period. So our standard period is 2 pi. That's how long it takes for a normal sine or cosine function to repeat itself. But it sometimes is not that. The way to change that, the only way to change that, is with a horizontal shift. And if we recall, not a horizontal shift, a horizontal stretch or shrink, a horizontal dilation. And if we recall, horizontal dilations were done to the inside of the function operation. So if there was something multiplied by x inside the sine, or multiplied by x inside the cosine. And since the shapes are the same of the graphs, it doesn't matter whether you're dealing with a sine or a cosine. So this value b, it helps us find out what our period is. Our standard period is 2 pi. If you have a value b, you take the standard period and you divide it by b. And that's it. That gives you your standard period. That gives you your modified period. Every single time in a sine or a cosine function, the period is 2 pi divided by whatever's multiplied by your x inside the sine or cosine. Not what's added, whatever's multiplied by your x inside your sine and cosine. All right. So let's just break down everything we have in a sine or cosine equation. So everything we've talked about comes from here. Too many lines. The first manipulation comes from A. The absolute value of A is our amplitude. So twice our amplitude is the total height of the function. The maximums are one amplitude above the axis of the wave. The minimums are one amplitude below the axis of the wave. And our axis of the wave is at y equals k. So the axis of the wave is at y equals k. And lastly, 2 pi over b gives us our period. So these are the things we know about a sinusoid so far. All right, join me next time and we'll talk about phase shifts.